So if China's policies towards fentanyl precursor exports is directly leading to the deaths of Americans, wouldn't that in many respects be an act of war?
Well, certainly one could consider that an act of war. I think Beijing likely assumes that they are doing something that is gray zone, that is beneath the level that is going to incur the wrath of the United States. And the reason why they believe that is that it has been done now for years, and it has not incurred the wrath of the United States. We've made excuses for them.
There's also another aspect, and you touched on this, which is the money laundering. So Chinese banks, including state-owned banks, have been helping Mexican drug cartels launder their fentanyl drug money. Can the U.S. do something about this, and would that make a dent?
It would be spectacular if the U.S. Treasury took this as seriously as we take other financial crimes. Yeah, they could. They have not chosen to do so yet.
I kind of want to ask, because you've had experience working in government on both the defense and national security side related to China and in the Commerce Department related to China.
Yeah.
Were there similarities or differences in your experience, like approaching China from these angles?
I think, I certainly gained different perspectives as I moved to different portions of the U.S. government and got to understand how different departments and agencies, viewed the U.S.-China relationship, what different departments and agencies thought were their missions. I think we should be clear that for a long period of time, U.S. strategy towards China, our policy towards China, was predicated upon a belief that if China's economy developed, if China became wealthier, more technologically advanced, that would lead to a political liberalization, which was in our interest to have happen. That they would become a partner with us in maintaining an international order that was mutually beneficial to both of our interests, right? That was sort of our assumption. So in large measure, that meant that economic departments and agencies' job was to help the Chinese economy grow. Now, our national security departments and agencies, their job was to hedge against risk and to prepare for worst case scenarios, right? It isn't as if during this period of time we had no national security challenges with China. I mean, the third Taiwan Strait crisis in 1995 and 1996 certainly was a period of really heightened tensions between the two countries. And so we've had these issues, but we were pursuing this sort of two-track approach, right? Economic departments and agencies help the Chinese economy develop. National security departments and agencies hedge against worst case scenarios. And as our policies change from one of and I'll use a shorthand, engagement, right? That's that economic development leads to political liberalization, and we move to a competitive strategy. It was very hard for the economic departments and agencies to understand that their primary missions were changing, right? That their job wasn't to help the Chinese economy anymore. Their job was to make sure the Chinese economy didn't work as well. And that was a very difficult thing for them to sink in. And it's still deeply debated. I mean, when you watch Secretary Yellen give speeches at Johns Hopkins back in April of 2023, she's very clear that her purpose is to build a mutually beneficial economic relationship with China. That seems to be in tension with the broader White House policy, but that just gets to show that there are still deep divisions across U.S. bureaucracy on what our policy is and what different departments and agencies should be doing.
Well, in the 20th century, the U.S. supported investment in and the economic growth of certain fascist countries such as South Korea and Taiwan. And both of those countries did liberalize into democracies. So it might make sense to think that could be the same with the People's Republic of China, but it has not been that at all. Why do you think it has been so different of a trajectory with the PRC?
Yeah. I probably wouldn't use fascist to describe South Korea and Taiwan in the 70s and 80s. I'd probably use. I mean, they were certainly sort of authoritarian, certainly controlled by sort of parties that controlled the military. But your point is that in those cases, we chose to use economic inducements to persuade those leaders that they were better off in allowing for political reforms to happen. And it was successful. So it was not unreasonable to assume that a similar approach with the PRC would work. And I would contend that that's also what we assumed with the Russian Federation. It's what we assumed with the former communist states of Eastern Europe, is that by embracing them, bringing them into the economic system, enabling their economic growth, that it would create the conditions for political reforms to happen. That's not an unreasonable policy, but I think we should be clear that it doesn't always work. And so where we are now is that we had a Chinese Communist Party that understood the policy we were seeking to achieve, right? And that the Chinese Communist Party would be the loser in that policy. I think the Chinese people would have been the big winner in that policy. But for the party, they understood that they would be the losers in that policy. And under Xi Jinping, they have sought to steel themselves to that policy and move into a competitive Cold War with the United States. And we've been a little bit slow in understanding that transition. They thought we were undermining them because we were, and they reacted. And now we are having to change our own policies. And that's the dynamic that we're in. Yeah.
Do you think that the U.S. has a whole of government approach to China? Like, do you think that that is a useful thing to do?
Yeah. So again, as I kind of laid out, we have had in the past a whole of government approach. And that approach was sort of on two tracks: help the Chinese economy grow, hedge against risk. As we've shifted to a more competitive policy, one of strategic competition, of long-term rivalry, our economic departments and agencies have not made the shift to what would be the new, what they would be doing underneath that new policy. There has been some. I mean, certainly, we are watching. My hat's off to Secretary Raimondo and her team at the Commerce Department in doing a good chunk of this work, right, moving things in a real direction. But it's not clear to me that the Treasury Department fully feels that. I mean, I think they still largely value the stability of the global economic system and global financial system as more important than putting pressure on China. And those are policy choices, right? That's essentially what's happened. I think that they should be aligning that much more. I think they should be taking more action. But I understand that that is an open debate.
I mean, is that, do you think, a legitimate idea here that if the U.S. were to pull out of China, or the U.S. were to really stop the investment in China, that could crash not just the Chinese economy, but the global economy, putting Americans in serious financial problems?
I mean, I think that is a risk, and I think that's something that has to be accounted for. Policymakers need to be accounting for a variety of different risks. Although I do believe that sending a clear message to Americans and others that the U.S. government is no longer going to act in ways in which we help the Chinese economy sends the right messages through the market for people to recalibrate themselves and get themselves into better positions, right? That business leaders then understand the dynamics that are happening, right? And they understand that if I'm going to build a business or I'm going to continue to operate a business, I need to account for the geopolitical risks that are now being made very obvious to me. And then in doing so, they'll make their own changes. I think certainly extreme and rapid shifts cause significant risk to a global economy, but a strong, consistent signal to move away allows businesses and the global economy to adapt. So again, that's why I think it's incredibly important for our economic departments and agencies to be sending very clear messages to U.S. businesses and to U.S. investors and to foreign investors that the game has changed. We're not helping anymore.